For me, it's just beautiful to have the opportunity to sit with you and talk, even though it's a small amount of time.
It's a half opportunity, but
yeah, you know, right. Well,
we'll make the most of it.
Yeah,
that's all there is in the world at the moment.
Yes, and of course there is the frame of this is work. The frame is like, how can this interaction be valuable not only for both of us, but also for those listening, and also in principle for the relational context that we're a part of and care about.
Yeah,
and we got to figure that out too. And
once the idea of, as long as the idea of those listening is stretching beyond you know, who's in your neighbourhood, work must be alienating when it's knowledge work, you know. Yeah, when then it's of course it's going to be abstract, and of course it's going to be metaphysics rather than physics, and it's going to be, you know, yeah. As soon as you stretch beyond your relational, your immediate relational, then yeah, work becomes alienating.
Right.
I think Marx said that somewhere. I'm sure, and I'm sure he had this particular situation in mind.
Well, one of the factors, one of the things I care about is trying to understand in what way I can cultivate a broader relational context where it makes sense to speak invitations, where it makes sense to share ideas. That is a kind of responsible influence. Yeah, opening into invitations into participation, so that it's not elitism in the sense of disconnected, disembodied, uninvolved, but that nevertheless cares for understanding deep patterns that, of course, take us beyond this time and place.
That's it. And it's trying to, but then it's trying to maintain relational accountability. Yeah. They're within those relations that I found really difficult. Yeah. I found it's really stripped, you know, something out of me.
Yeah. Can I ask you about that?
Building relationships with people beyond, you know, what's a reasonable number for a start, right? For a human being,
right? But it can't be reasonable.
But then even beyond the beyond your scope of the local.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's weird. So with you, technically, like, you are local.
Yeah.
And we've been, how many years we've been trying to
get time? Almost 3.
3 years we've been trying to get time or the right context to be able to meet properly.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Well, let me ask you a question.
You know, but you are local. But of course, that's not going to, and that hasn't worked.
There was a pandemic in the way.
There was a pandemic in the middle of things. Yeah, but it's trying to maintain. It's not just that. It's about, you're not just finding space or time to meet in a schedule like this one. It's jammed in between things and it's messy because there's kids, and that means that someone else can't do their work. You know, trying to keep the kids from coming in and wrecking our, whatever it is our labour's creating right now. Right. It means there's people walking past talking. It means there's stuff on the road. You know, it means it's not perfect. You know, it means all these things. Yeah, but there's more. It's about, well, if we connect, you know, beyond some superficial level, in which we did get to meet face to face at an event, briefly, but I was like, you know, there's no way we can connect like properly and maintain some kind of relational accountability, because, you know, that takes hours. It takes yeah, measurable work units. And when all of those are taken, it's like, well, how can I form another relationship with another person that I know I have to betray, that I know I'm not going to be able to honour that relationship properly. Yeah. And, you know, I'm going to have a real connection with somebody, you know, spirit-heart connection, and we're going to be connected in that way. And I'll start thinking it was a sibling or an uncle or something, and then I'm not going to be able to meet any of those obligations. It's wounding, you know.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
It's stressful.
It is. It is. Well, I feel that, and I feel in touch with working in relation to that. So, in a sense, that speaks to some of the necessary dynamics, the realities to consider when we think about, well, what does it mean to share voice, to share spirit, to share dedication in the context of building culture, in the context of envisaging different cultural possibilities, all right? Relating to patterns that in many ways are sick, and there's a recognition that other patterns are important to orient towards, right? It's not for obviously me, it's not for you, it's not for just the two of us, but can we build, and I think we are. It's difficult, it takes time, it requires a presencing that of the various inadequacies and the sacrifices and the wounds, but the hope is that the resonance of that effort, the resonance of that sharing voice in a context where it's heard, then imbues that onward next movement in the fold, so that others are present and are in some sense sharing in the kindling of that flame. And so if there is something to give that feels as though one can, then you give it.
Well, I mean, that's it. You're telling stories and you're sharing stories. And it's for, see, I'm whinging about just not being in the right economy or a healthy economy or a local economy, not being in an economy that can care for your relations. But in the end, you're still in it, and the economy is national and international. It's and your connections through that economy, all your relational exchanges, they are many and they're far afield, all the time. So they're weak links. You still have to live within weak link networks, and that's just it. It's like, I can whinge as much as I like about how damaging it is to participate in that, but yet we're participating in it. So, I'm not like going, oh, this sucks and we shouldn't be doing it. It's like, well, we have to, because where people get their story. This story is mass-produced. Story is, it has to become propaganda. It has to be, boiled down to, creating bloody over-the-top characters that people can empathise with or idealise, in the moment, and then and therefore care about, but in a way that gives them a big dopamine hit. Quick roller coaster ride, in, out, done, cliffhanger for the next one. And that's it. It's like that's the thing that we're in. So it's like,
it's not the thing that I've
and
been
within that we've it's pretty cool to slow down and find some niche audience somewhere that's keen to listen to a yarn. But we can't fool ourselves that the new shit is going to grow out of that.
What else does it grow out of?
We both know how emergence works. And if we were going to have some beautiful, way of being and way of being together and living together, that was going to, be in a way that our species would be able to continue as the custodians of the earth, etc., then we would see that emergent from real contexts where if we're developing culture, recreating regenerative culture, that would come out of, there'd be people sitting around and I'd be sitting around their place, this place, and the idea of our places would, blur, and people would be hanging out and helping me raise my bloody autistic son, and I wouldn't have to be doing it myself, bloody 12 hours a day, on my own, and then trying to find time to connect with people to have the yarns, to do the emergence. It'd be like, we'd all be together, and I'd be helping look after your autistic kid, and you'd be helping look after mine, and shit would be happening, and we'd be growing fucking food. It wouldn't be like a mad scrabble. Yesterday we're planting dill out the back as quick as we can, just to try and have something. It's like, quick, before that season passes. We're just trying to keep up with all this really silly garden. Where can we plant these things? I need other people's gardens. I need like 20 connected ones. Because this one's crappy. There's all bulbs in there with all these European flowers that come up at really fucking awkward times and choke shit out. You see the privet tree back there? It's that broadleaf English privet. You can see how many berries that's about to drop. That's going to be a freaking nightmare, those toxic things. Because this fella, he just wants to eat them, and there's 40 billion of them on the ground. The birds also like them and shit them into every waterway. And this is like, I don't know, you know, you see that, when you see that spread, it just can take over like 100 hectares in like a year. And it's for hedges. Privet is like a privet hedge. They brought that over from England to make hedges and windbreaks. But it just makes a forest where every tree is like an inch apart and doing really well. This impenetrable thicket that just poisons and kills everything. It's awful. It's a horrible frickin' thing. We're not allowed to cut it down. The landlord really likes it. So that's there. All these things are here. And in the gaps in between, we try and put a bit of dill and sage and whatever we can. And I make spears out of that. Like every now and then there's a nice straight branch that comes out. A privet actually makes good spears. So, like I always say, when life gives you privet, you make spears. Because they don't have orange trees here, which I normally make my spear handles out of. So, you know, I'm going to use that English privet instead. I've got like this little bullet spear inside.
I'd love to see it.
That's why, like, it's just this little. So a bullet spear, it's for you're not in open spaces. It's for like thick scrub or you know, places you can't swing a big spear around. You get this little bullet spear. And so it's kind of like this little hyper-vigilance sort of hate weapon, which I realised, you know, when I wrote the book a few years ago that you read that made you interested in wanting to talk to me in the first place. You know, I was making all kinds of things. I was making musical instruments still. I was making like, you know, all kinds of different tools. And now I don't make tools. The last 3 years, all I've made is weapons of war. Like I've only made things that can kill people. It's like this.
So I'm part listening to you saying that, and I'm part watching your kid climb on a pole, making sure he's all right. So I'm kind of channeling death weapons over here, and I'm watching, trying to make.
He's right. He'll stand up on that in a minute, and you'll panic. He never falls.
Yeah.
Somehow he does have an intelligence in his body that prevents that.
I can't remember in the book. Did you say you make didgeridoos?
I did.
Yeah.
Like I used to. I don't anymore.
Do you like to play them?
I used to. I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was. I think I was still in my 20s when I realised that it was silly.
Yeah.
Hey. Okay. No. You just changed your levels. No.
It's okay. No. That one's actually not. We're not actually using it.
Hey. Little man. He might start singing his J-Lo songs in a minute.
We'll make that the intro.
He thinks he is J-Lo.
It's a new jingle.
When he grows up and finds out he's not with a T-Nex, he's going to be devastated. He's going to need a Kleenex. Yeah. Anyway. Now, what were we talking about? Something.
Well, I listened to a conversation you had, at least you released in December on the others. And I think it was with most of the folks you speak with at the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Lab. I would love to be able to use the word mob and have it be like, I grew up saying the word mob in that way. It's nice to hear you guys speak with such a fluid lingo, and I appreciated the resonance. It's very similar to how I spend a lot of time in conversation with people. Obviously totally different vernacular, but the feeling of the shared participation was there.
Well, I'm trying to place your regional thing, because there's elements of your accent that are quite posh.
Yeah.
But then there's a few dropped consonants and glottal stops in there as well. It's a bit, you know, East End.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if that just.
That's where my dad was from.
Okay.
I grew up in northwest London. I went to a posh school, but I left when I was 11.
Yeah, but then all your T's are missing, you know. So.
Yeah.
So that
because
your dad was East End.
Yes, but you have to understand that as a posh English kid coming over, but your parents split up, you come over to like semi-rural Brisbane.
Right.
And you go to school and you get your arm broken in the first week.
Yeah.
you know, that's a melting pot for how an accent could change. So mine was quite consciously cultivated basically my whole life.
Yeah.
To try and retain some sense of who I was in that regard, but also when I used to go back and speak with my dad, who's passed away now, he was in many sense like your classic anti-intellectual intellectual. So he never really liked, for instance, that I was particularly interested in even learning a lot, even though he worked so hard to put me into that school. He never liked that I went on to do philosophy really, and he was always very skeptical of
That's interesting.
So there's a melting pot in.
So what was his class consciousness like? In terms of,
I mean,
if he's
very
quite
conflicted.
sounds like he's quite a philosopher anyway.
Very conflicted in his own house.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But not so much beyond his own house.
Right.
Because it takes a certain social capacity to really engage philosophically well. A lot of people, they struggle with that, and so they like to keep their own dominion where their opinions are the only ones that are valid, and then beyond that, it's often a game of persona, which obviously we all engage in to some degree, but for the really deep work of thinking and reflecting, then there's also a certain capacity for being with, I think, one's own healing process that's necessary, because it's a massively vulnerable thing to really think about and relate to the unknowns of existence. And he was someone who grew up having to take a certain amount of responsibility, but not having much guidance about that. And so he built, in some sense, a dominion of his own understanding that if that was challenged beyond a certain point, that would cause, you know, quite a lot of friction and tension.
Right.
Yeah.
These things start out so innocent.
Yeah.
It's like the thrill of a bit of posh toddy, and then entire lives are created and ended within huge narrative arcs and historic, things. Oh my God, romance is so lovely like that. Like, I think a romance like forces you to be just completely ahistorical for a bit. Maybe that's where the that rush comes from, like that.
Yeah.
That drug, like.
Yeah. Well, it's this time, this place, fuck the rest of it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the world's had like a romance with something in a way, a quick fling, and then missed what was going on for the 90s and the noughts, and then what? Cheers.
Yeah.
Yep. Suddenly, it's trying to pay the child support.
Right. That is how that narrative developed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. It wasn't romantic at that point.
No.
Yeah.
No. No, it's not. And you just like retreat to the darker corners of the web. You know, just complaining with all the incels.
Not yet.
Not there.
Not yet. Not there yet. No.
Not there. Don't go there.
No.
Yeah. Oh, it's worth a look, like for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just to sort of go, okay, those feelings I'm having, not valid.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't lead a good place.
Yeah. Or just they're not valid. And I can see it. I can see that reflected in that gruesome caricature of those pricks over there. I can see that doesn't work. The feelings I'm having aren't valid. I have relational accountabilities. This brings it back to that. Yeah.
I just thought of a question.
Yeah.
It's going to take me a while to get it out, but it feels like it feels like a beautiful question.
Bite down on something.
Something that seems to matter a lot is the relationship we strike up with our own perceptions. It's extremely difficult to change that up. It's part of, obviously, how we get locked. And I'm wondering, from the perspective of your heritage, whether practices, whether rituals, whether there's story that is most helpful for, in some sense, it's like a necessity of a wise process for people not to become trapped and locked into thinking only one way about a given phenomena, or that pattern to the detriment of the other patterns, to the broader whole, to being in relationship with emergence and new possibility. Is there anything that comes through for you with respect to this?
There's so much, but it's also contradictory. You know, it's like It's things that apply, but it's all problematic, and it's all good and well in a honeymoon period, if we're going to continue that relationship metaphor, that romance metaphor.
Yeah.
You know, there's always, when you're doing, you know, intercultural stuff, or you're doing that abductive reasoning of, you know, applying your ancient knowledge to contemporary systems and understandings and stuff. There's always that beautiful hybrid vigor moment and that beautiful exchange, bloody, look, third way, you know, sunshine, lollipops for a minute. There's a brief honeymoon. You get that dopamine hit, and then it's all very bad. Yeah, and you find out you're on the wrong side of a transaction that's happened, where you didn't read the fine print. And nobody really read the fine print, but it's there because nothing's ahistorical. But you forget about that in the romance of it, you know. I don't know. Yeah, there's things that apply to things, but then they kind of don't as well. And it's like there's stuff that just gets destroyed if you apply it outside of the quiet corners where it belongs, you know, just for caring for country. I don't know. It's really tricky. It's really tricky. I know there's things, and you know, and my whole thing is about that, you know. But and I've always been cautious, you know, not to go too far or to overstep. You know, just work with what's there and what's already in that interface, you know.
Right.
But it's still dangerous work to do. Yeah, I just really struggle with it.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it belongs in such a continuum of deep time, and then, you know, when you share it with people, it's, you know, they're not coming from that. They're seeing it in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, and them seeing it in a different way and then looping that back through, it does feel invigorating for a moment, but it also, like, changes it. And you've got to have firewalls in place so it doesn't pollute the source, you know. And that's not even colonization. It's not even like white privilege or anything that you want to call it. That's just like, you know, basic common sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tricky because we're not under that law. We're not under the old law. We're not under the old trading system here in the, you know, all that sort of fractal nested governance model that we've always had for economies and for, you know, decision making. You know, that's not there. We're in this, like, you know, feeding frenzy kind of thing where our knowledge is a commodity. It's not even that. It's a primary resource that's sort of waiting to have things done to it. And it's like, oh, Aboriginal people should just be doing that then. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, all right. So hang on, so we're mining our knowledge and then transforming it, translating it, value adding it, and it's just, you know, and you look at the labor you add, you know, to create value, you know, within that, and then you look at that, and then you think about, well, where's the capital in this arrangement? And where is that being increased and for whom? And then what's the purpose of it? Where's that being used, deployed, and then where is it being discarded to when it's done? There's like, but if you think that deeply about everything, then everything's fucked and you never do anything. That's the other thing.
Well, it is an important thing to think deeply about. Yeah. As you say.
I mean, so you ask a question and I'm thinking, oh, well, there's like 40 other considerations, like before I even get, and I get like 20% of the way through and I'm just going, you know what? No. You know, that would have to be like a 10,000 word essay. And even then it wouldn't touch the sides. It's like, We do, so I like to just throw a dick joke in.
Totally.
From time to time.
Yeah.
Just like, but just in a way where people aren't sure if it was a dick joke or not.
Yeah, good. You know, dick joke was how I got basically the only job that's ever paid me well.
Oh,
yeah.
Go on, there's a story there.
Well, before I suppose, sacrificed enough of my short-term earning potential to really follow the path of, let's say, embodied philosophy, and being present with what is here and making with right now.
Yeah.
Then one of the things that I became sort of more or less pressured, obviously, by the world and others, and a little bit from myself to do was copywriting. And so I told a dick joke in the opening line to a cover letter I wrote. Ended up doing work for a guy who, yeah, I mean, he paid me really well to produce essentially nothing of value, and I'm thankful for that, because if it had been valuable, it would have been probably fairly destructive.
Yeah.
So I realized pretty quickly that the situation I was in was one where I was being paid to maybe like furnish the potential of a dream that was, you know, already dead.
Nah.
He was working with some AI researchers.
Right.
Who he was. I mean, I can't, you know, it's public, so I can't really say too much other than the relational dynamics were, let's say, fairly toxic. But there was
Well, dick joke's going to get you in there.
Right. There was a lack of awareness about what was necessary to even treat the people working in the organisation well enough so that they'd actually want to work for something to produce a whole at all. And so people were doing things that were basically completely ineffective, and that wasn't getting passed through to the guy who wanted the thing to succeed and was also ultimately paying the people. And so it was, you know, basically it was a waste of time, apart from the fact that people were getting paid money, and I happened to be there for, I don't know, 5 or 6 months of that process, not full time, but just in part of it. And so anyway.
So this was in the Philippines when you were working for Ron and Jim Watkins, or?
Correct. Yeah. Well, it was. Yeah, it was about 6 years ago now.
Because dick joke could get you right now, like.
Totally.
So can we see your CV, and you just open up? It's just a dick.
Just a
dick pic.
No, I believe.
It's like you're in.
Yeah, I believe I said no. I won't. It's almost there's almost no possibility of trying to remember a dick joke that wasn't even funny in text, that you don't even know the words of, to present it in a way that's going to have any sort of punch, particularly when it wasn't funny in the first place.
Well, it's not the joke. Well, the thing about a dick joke, it's not the joke that's funny. It's the context and how inappropriate it is.
Right.
It's about boundary violation.
Totally.
So dick jokes, dick pics, these are all frat boy kind things. And it's about violating boundaries and doing it in a way that you can get away with it. And
well, in comedy,
being able to high five over that a little bit. So
if a comedian tells a joke, it's not always
if you do a joke
violation,
and it somehow has, but if it's got other merit, but then it's well, why did it have to be a dick joke then? Because that just gives it that extra bit of punch. That extra bit of punch, this meritocracy, this meritorious joke, this joke that has its own merit. You know, it also is a dick joke, and on the basis of its merit, it's slid through, you know, unmolested.
The other 150
and that's allowed. It's
kilometers.
flown under the radar, without really bothering anybody, but still violating a bunch of boundaries. And then that's. I think that's where these dick jokes sort of thrust their way through the culture, and this is how it actually happens. Getting back to our original theme of cultural transformation and change, it happens usually through the worst fucking things, like the worst things that go on, and because these are the things that there's no ombudsman for dick jokes. You know what I mean? There's no institutions that are sorting these things out. There's institutions trying to stop them from happening. But so therefore, of course, that's where the worst people are gonna go and put their energy into. And that's where the best people, that's where their energy, their attention's gonna be there too. So there's all this energy going into something that's unregulated and bloody, and that's just the only truly demotic part left of the culture. Which is dick jokes. And then so it's going to emerge from that. That's the future. The future is like, you know, just another phallocentric culture emerging from the shitty ashes of this one. And so that dick will rise like a phoenix from the ashes of the patriarchy, and it will begin again. Just a micro penis to begin with, and then, but that's a grower. That one. It's not a shower. It's a grower. Yeah.
Good. Well, I feel like
the emergent patriarchy.
So if we play with this, then
let's play with it. Let's play with it for a while.
I felt like 95% of what you said was definitely not violating anything.
Yeah.
And then I felt you began to just play a little bit with the next 5% of who might potentially feel violated.
Because you've gone like, okay, I'm comfortable with that, and that's
But it's not violation.
That's just
then,
encouraging. That's just encouraging me, like as an abusive narcissist, to see how much further I can push it. You know, it's this is the thing. This is the thing with a culture that's built on boundary violation. And this is the culture, and this is the marketplace that I'm forced to interact with. And these are the relational accountabilities that I have to operate within, which are not accountabilities at all. I can do what I want. And that's a really bad thing for somebody who needs a very particular brief in order to be effectively creative.
Yeah. Totally. So you didn't use the word membranes about 20 minutes ago, but there was this sense of, in the context of relating with each other, sharing this knowledge, sharing this energy, sharing this intensity, and we're navigating these membranes even obviously in the here and now with your son, with neighbours, with all these time constraints.
So we have a bit of a shared genealogy with Jim Rutt around the idea of membranes. Not that he invented it, but
no.
It's and we both know him, and he talks about that a lot.
Totally.
Cultures have semi-permeable membranes.
Right.
Healthy cultures.
Yeah, but it would seem to me that how we're relating with each other, in a part we're sort of constructing what the appropriateness of that membrane is. Yeah. And then there's a whole bunch, even the first 25 minutes of this is going to tune out a whole bunch of people, maybe appropriately, so that 35 minutes in, you can see whether or not it's possible to...
Depends how you edit it though, you know, because maybe we move into a critique now of what that process looks like. A process of, you know, coming together ostensibly in a good faith dialogue. And how people can, how there's a lot of this idea in the spaces that we operate in, the intellectual space we operate in, about good faith dialogues, about all these stoic sort of protocols for steel manning positions, for all this kind of thing, this amicable, you know, yes, you can talk to anybody, and radical free speech, and, you know, big open front door, I can talk to anybody. All points of view are valid, etc., etc. So, you know, we can do that, but it's a perfect place. It's straight away, can you see the seeds of its destruction immediately? As it's just open for people to just, for bad actors to just mess with the place.
Oh, it doesn't make any sense to me.
So because you're going to sit there and in good faith, you're going to allow me to violate your semi-permeable membrane.
Will I?
Initially with a bit of a light-hearted apologist approach to dick jokes, and then, you know, and then I'll build, as you allow that to happen. It's like, well, I've just permeated your membrane, and then I'm just gonna keep thrusting away at it, and you're gonna push back, but your pushback is gonna be like, you know, I'll just be like, yeah, push back, baby, you know, and then I'll just keep ramping it up, and I'll keep ramping it up until I've completely violated every part of you know, the sanctity of the conversation in the first place and this good faith dialogue that we're having. That's why I just, I see this in the space a lot. So sorry for the whole practicum around that of trying to demonstrate that. But I have a really big problem and a big critique of the spaces that we operate in. That everybody ends up in if they're interested in complexity science or systems theory and things like that, and applying those things to things like governance or economy or anything like that. And people who are doing multidisciplinary work in those spaces, you're going to run into all this metamodern spaces and all these sorts of things. And there's, you know, there's bad faith shit in there. And there's a lot of like the absolute worst parts of the Enlightenment being replicated there and being regenerated, you know, through there in this kind of arc, you know, to save the seeds of you know, of just the reasonable, just the facts, you know. We're just looking at the facts here. You know, the data doesn't lie. Sense-making kind of very calm, reasonable, yes, we'll include everybody kind of thing. Yeah, there's a bit of a patriarchal and even fascist sort of arc, you know, where the seed banks of some really shitty ideas are preserved and go through there. And I'm not sure how deliberate it is. I know that there are some actors that are doing that quite deliberately. So through relationships, you know, like where all that touches the intellectual dark web. You know, I know there's dark money, and even quite less than dark money coming in from, you know, people like folks like Peter Thiel and all that kind of stuff into the space. That's like trafficking all these shittier ideas that are there to encourage, you know, the shittiest and stupidest people among us to keep voting and acting and fighting against their best interests and in the interests of the powerful and the billionaires and the, you know, the people who are surveilling us as the people who are controlling us as the people, you know, which are the super rich, the mega rich, all these things. They're not people like yourself who are educated, people like myself who are educated, and therefore we're the elites. Yeah, it's not that. It's, yeah, people with a lot of money who have a big interest in holding on to it at the worst time in history when everybody's like, you know, really struggling to meet the minimum standards of the society that sprung up around us. Yeah. You know, and live properly. You know, it's difficult. So, yeah, that's where we are. So anyway, the whole, like dick jokes practicum there was a way of testing like that, doing a live experiment there, and then applying it to that, to what I wanted to raise with you, which is my main concern about the areas that we're operating in, and the ways that we're being stretched. I find myself stretched. I find myself repeating things from, you know, fucking Eric Weinstein. So not anymore, but a couple of years ago, I was like saying things that I'd heard him say. You know what I mean? And they weren't good things. Xenophilic restrictionism. That sounds, yeah. Oh, the gated institutional fucking narrative, or, you know, all this, this kind of, this bullshit faux intellectual sort of, you know, fasci apologist, kind of just the tip bloody, you know, nationalism and you know, oh, it's not misogyny if, you know, I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean, it's just a scientific fact. Men and women are different. I mean, just look at the facts of, all right, chess. People who are really good at chess, the best chess players in the world, let's just take the emotion out of the argument and let's just look at the numbers. You know, I thought, why? Why you look, why? What's your purpose? You dingleberries. You know, and there's a lot of that in this space that we're talking in. And so, you know, so I'm shitting the bed in there. I have relationships with people in there, you know, like good people. And, you know, I'm often shitting the bed with those relationships by just doing and saying the things that I need to do to, you know, make sure I'm disrupting those things as much as I can. I don't know, how do you find it? That's the ladder for a fire truck, man.
Well, I'm torn between, well, I don't really feel a desire to respond as if we're both participating in exactly the same place that you're referencing. My preference would be to share more of the truth of who I am and what I care about.
Well, we never did talk about
partly
what your mother's class consciousness was like.
my
Because it's easier to say all the right things around that. You coming from a middle class sort of background.
I don't know what the right things are to say. I mean, I suppose I have some.
Oh, just something that's consistent and that has an internally consistent logic to it. That's the right thing. Yeah, you know, because your class consciousness comes through that way.
Well, there's many things that have internally consistent logic.
That's true.
You know, so you still have to pick. Well, you know, my mum loves me a lot, and she cared a lot for me, particularly when I was younger. She's very good with babies and young kids, and she did a decent job of letting me go as well, or letting me get out there and pursue how I met the world in you know, I suppose a loving, transformative way. She's not someone who wants to be spending much of her time thinking beyond the frequency that she's comfortable in. She doesn't listen to my podcast, for instance.
Right.
Which is totally fine.
That's right. No one in my family listens to or reads any of my stuff. I don't have one family member who's read my book. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't think you have to expect your family to do that stuff.
I don't. But
I don't hold that against her.
Your question was about class consciousness.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So there's a certain sense in which she probably feels certain types of restrictions with respect to what she can engage with. That, from my perspective, you know, I've certainly felt the pain of that, and in my own way over the years, I've wanted to share presence in a way that opens the possibility for her perception to connect in some artistic sense with the depth of who she is, as well as how she can meet the world in a way that might unveil something more well, nourishing for herself, in a sense. You know, but on the...
So I'm picturing Vinnie Jones and Helena Bonham Carter.
Oh, no.
Mum and Dad, is that...
No. More like you know, imagine a mum that was sort of like gonna... You'd think she would be baking stuff for the kids, but actually doesn't really bake.
Right.
But she's does other stuff that you might associate with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And then, so on the space that we participate in to some degree, the thing is that, you know, whatever the feeling is here and now of a commitment to sharing in truth together as we can, in a way that's essentially, there's a risk associated with it. So I've always done that.
You're letting someone in your membrane.
Right. Yeah. I've
use a bit of protection.
It needs a bit of protection. So I'm a dude that can protect myself when it comes to psychic interaction. So it's not an issue for me, and I don't feel violated by you. I don't necessarily feel in every moment like you were speaking to me. I felt like in part you're speaking to the projected context that we're both speaking into, which is relevant because that's there. But that's why I'm pumping the brakes and being like, okay, I share some of that perception, not all of it. In order for me to share that with you, we obviously need to be connected here.
Trying to do a live demonstration / experiment.
Totally. Well, it all
to
is,
illustrate a thing, which all comes back to your original question about growing cultures and whether it's even possible.
Well,
in our context,
we can make with, you know, and if we want to use the word culture to mean something that could be loving or could be fucked, then we can definitely make culture.
Yeah.
The question is if we can make something together that might be worthwhile.
Well, look, you know, you geezer dad and your posh mum made you.
Oh no, she's not. She's more and more. My grandfather was he was a policeman, and my nana, I think she works as a typewriter for some time.
Yeah.
I don't come from a posh background.
They're very much, you know, it's a social mobility thing for you.
Yeah, that's right. It was, we haven't been to university. You're going to put you into a good school, you're going to go to university. But my family split up when I was very young, and it was quite a volatile thing. And so from a very young age, I've actually been on a very, very different track to all of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, the way I probably feel to some people on first projection turns out to just be a small part of the way.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's an interesting thing, you know, because, you know, part of the reason why I'm interested to talk to you and get to know you, and this is a ridiculous weight, and I'm not putting this weight on you, and there's many reasons, there really are. But, you know, it feels to me that to the degree I could even begin to want to speak with people about something like culture, while living in Australia, not having lived a life where I was enculturated into understanding place, right? And then also being taken away from the place I did want to be in. I feel an absolute sense of commitment to listening and knocking on the door and trying to discern whether it's possible for me to come into right relational context in order to treat place with more respect, right?
All you can do is come alongside and share story.
Yeah.
And then we can, you know, and then we do things that emerge out of that.
Yeah.
Which is what I was trying to convey with the Privet story. I said,
right.
Because you're English.
I am. I was.
Yeah, and that's English Privet. And, you know, its great-great-grandparents were English. It's not now. It's like here. But it's, you know, yeah. And so what's, So how do I interact with that? Now, I'm not saying you're like that. No. But just the whole, you know, that whole idea of, you know, something new in a place where there's something that's new to a place, in a place where there's lots of shit that's been here for a long time around.
It doesn't make any sense, unfortunately.
It makes sense, but it's just, it interacts in a certain way. And, you know, you can throw a lens around that of, you know what, life gives you Privet, you make spears. That's cool, you know? It's like, yeah, well, so I'm having a cultural interaction with that tree because I can't carve wood and make something cultural without making a relationship with that species. So I do have a relationship with that Privet.
Well, an idea just came to me.
You know, but it, you know, like I said, it's you know, it also changes your practice a bit. And I stop making instruments and tools, and I start making weapons of war. And I wonder how much of that is a reasonable response to the encroachment of you know, all these different species, including the privet, and, you know, the world and the economy and everything else around me, how much of it's an overreaction to that, or how much of it's a reasonable reaction, and how much of it it's just the context changing me. You know, me being responsive to the context. You know, these are just all things to keep your eye on. And depending on what lens you're using from moment to moment, you might see those things in different ways. You know, I have already answered that question, by the way. That question of, you know, the why of that, how much of it is the species bending me and fucking making me all violent and shit. You know, and it's not, the answer is not at all. That's not where that's coming from. That's like, yeah, it's just, yeah, that's older stuff. That's like hypervigilance from childhood, you know, coming to the fore, and, you know, being in an uncertain and vulnerable position in the world, and then, you know, those things asserting themselves, and that's all that is. Because another fella working with the privet might make something completely different, you know. Might make drumsticks. You know.
Can I change the topic a tiny bit? Just like,
you know,
maybe a spear would be useful.
That's the end of that thread.
Because I thought of a way I might be able to help you, and that's, you know, I really respected the friendship and the creative energy that was in the conversation I listened to. It was on Increase with your fellows, and the audio was not fantastic, and I can actually record good audio.
Okay.
So if you ever want to have a yarn with your folks, I'd like to participate. I don't have to, but I could definitely jam with you guys and it'd be fun. I can basically, if you're in one place, then I can.
If we're in one place,
then I can give mics to people and record it. So
sweet. Oh, that's the trick.
Keep it in mind.
That's the trick, is when we're in one place. I think we've got one coming up in a couple of months.
And I'll produce it for you and share it to you, no problem.
Yeah, man, that sounds deadly. That sounds great. Man, that'll be awesome.
Might be a good way to continue the dialogues.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Yeah, you jump in then. But that's yeah.
So we're coming up on an hour.
That's the
now.
thing. Those things, yeah. But those things are the things that work, like the processes and, you know, the protocols for yarns and stuff like that. These things are things that work and that are valuable.
I'm creating those, by the way, with a bunch of people. I've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you know about all of that, but, you know, I know many of the people that will be listening to this.
Yeah.
And I know them because I've been trying to create contexts where if there is something resonant that catches, there's a place for that to come and be in dialogue, to connect with each other and to build something slowly together while getting to know each other.
Yeah.
Some of those people are here in Melbourne, and, you know, I'm sure they'd be interested in the crafting spears, but I tell you what, I've listened to a man who made a didgeridoo and played it, and it was one of the most beautiful, unique, astounding things I've ever experienced, and it's something I really want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with respect, it is something it's the kind of thing I'd like to talk to you about, both as an invitation, but also, I suppose, just, see, the kind of thing is like, I just want to relate with respect to that which will obviously relate with respect to me in turn.
Yeah, yeah.
And to share in the beauty of what's possible together, and to appreciate that.
Well,
So
I've still got one didgeridoo left, that last one I made like 20 years ago.
yeah. Would you play it again?
It just depends. It's like, well, what for? Sometimes, like, I do it for, I don't know. Sometimes I do it for like, I'm more often would play a vacuum cleaner pipe, like, just as a sort of something to stimulate thought and to make a certain point around something, you know. What I'd sort of, I don't know, point out troubling aspects of fucking, you know, bringing these things into, you know, the context of modernity and struggle and all that kind of thing.
If we were sitting around a fire with 10 other people and I had invited someone else there and they played the didgeridoo that they made, how would you, I mean, it's but you
It'd depend on how we ended up relating. If we ended up relating like siblings and they were like, yeah, bros, have a toot, then, you know, out politely I would have a toot. You know, but I wouldn't if it was like, you know, a lot of people play it like I won't play them at night kind of thing.
Right.
Like, for example, because, you know, it brings bad shit in. So I'm like, I play that at night. And I don't know, I'm just also aware of, and it'd be like someone playing guitar but not playing a song, just randomly strumming chords. If I can come together, like, you know, I've got some family in Mornington Island who, you know, have ceremony with Didge and therefore have song. And if I went there for 6 months and learned those songs properly and just played those, then I'd be able to play the Didge, like proper play it, you know, in a limited way for, I don't know, I'd have like a tight 30 minutes or something, you know. But then what for? Yeah. And a lot of it's just random. And look, so much, so the stuff I learned was the stuff that fellas learn in prison, you know, and that you end up seeing performed on the dock in Sydney, you know, like by buskers in Sydney and stuff like that, and in Brisbane. You know, the stuff I learned was the stuff, the same 6 songs, dances that everybody learns in prison. You know, and that they were the songs that I'm playing. That's the rhythms that I'm playing on the Didge. That's the sounds I'm making, the stories I'm telling with those. And it was kind of, and it was bullshit. I didn't like it. He's going to give us J-Lo now.
Well, it is time.
Yeah. So I didn't like it, but there's more there. So the, I don't know. And then there's also the people who, you know, they start doing a Didge show and they're the real deal. They do it and then they suddenly stop and go, oh, the spirits are telling me someone in the room has cancer. Of course, there's always someone in the room with fucking cancer. Someone's going to put up their hand. And then they'll play the didgeridoo and then they'll tell them they'll announce that person's cured. And then everyone claps and I'm like, what happens to that person in a month's time when I find out they're not cured? You know, that's a fucking grifting old bastard, that one there. And I'm not allowed to say anything because he's an elder and really respected. And I'm like, can nobody see it? That's not one of our patterns. That's some snake oil shit. Anyway, this is the problem with elaborating on Aboriginal culture out of its context. There are inducements. There are, what does Schmachtenberger call them? The
incentives? Yeah,
there's perverse incentives that destroy culture and puts everybody into a grift. So, yeah.
Well,
that's what J-Lo sounds like, filtered through a 4-year-old Aboriginal albino kid.
Thank you, Tyson. Thank you.